Leadership pioneer Bernard Bass once said that there are as many definitions of leadership as there are persons who've attempted to define the concept. Intuitively, you'd think there'd be an agreement on the concept as important as leadership. It's a Google search term that returns 6.9 billion results. However, language to objectively define any human phenomenon is exceedingly difficult. Henry Mintzberg, a noted McGill University researcher, was the lead author of The Strategy Process, one of the most recognized academic texts on the subject. He opens the book by asking a question: what is strategy? The answer is immediate and unequivocal. There is no single, universally accepted definition. Personally, I believe strategy is many things, all part of the same continuum. For our purposes, let's define strategy as an idea, a bet on the future, a belief that if we do certain things now, other things that we want to occur in the future will in fact happen. Strategy then articulates the belief, providing both the goal and the way to obtain it. Next, strategic execution is the work of the leader, as she transforms strategy from vision into value, great ideas into action, and action into measurable results. Strategy, in its many forms, creates a spectrum of value. At the low end, with the lowest value, is the strategy. Bold or cautious, ambitious or measured, revolutionary or ordinary, evolutionary or just pouring old wine into new bottles. Strategy alone has very little intrinsic value. Crafting the strategic vision, the leader describes some desirable future. A future that with the help and support of followers can be achieved. Strategic vision adds meaning and understanding, bolsters support, and generates excitement. Strategic vision is a great way to communicate with big thinkers and big crowds to help orient followers in a new way of thinking. Double-click on strategic vision and it reveals strategic execution, a framework, the ways of working, new and old, used to convert ideas into action and action into measurable results. Zoom in on the strategic framework and you'll find the measures and metrics used to report progress and build a strategic success narrative. When it comes to what you want, when it comes to the future you want to build for your family and your community, are your strategies uniformly successful? Think about your strategy as a parent or to become a parent. Think about your strategies as an employee or employer. What about your strategy to lose weight or finally learn a second language? Do all of your strategies fly through the process to become part of an endless stream of success stories? Or does your strategy success vary? Strategy to vision, vision to framework, and framework to narrative. Where do you get stuck? From the edge of tomorrow, we're a growing legion of people that are learning to harness the power of change to build a brighter future. We invite you to join us and be a part of it all. This is Willing to Win. If you're willing to think different, willing to work different, willing to change at the speed of now, then you're willing to win. Welcome to Willing to Win. I'm Jeff Kaplan.
And I'm Tara Thomas-Gettman. We're glad that you are as excited as we are, we hope, about the topic of strategy, because initially it might sound not as sexy as other things you could be scrolling through on your devices, but the fact is, strategy is so important in our daily lives, both professionally and personally. And you asked us, you posed the question in the segment we like to call From the Edge, Jeff's opening monologue. You posed the question of, are your strategies uniformly successful? And I loved that because I had to really do the personal reflection to say, you know what? No, because I failed at many a New Year's resolution. So clearly I wasn't executing the strategy as effectively as other areas in my life where I've succeeded when applying a strategic approach?
When I was writing that out, I got an image in my mind of Dr. Phil saying, how's that working out for you? It's like, how's your strategy working out for you?
Right.
And I thought that was a great question to ask, because a lot of times when things are academic, it seems like they're so separated and removed from what we do, every day in our lives. That's something that they talk about at universities and stuff. But when you simplify it and you realize what it is, we realize, hey, strategy is really important to helping me create the life I want for myself and my family and my community.
And the one thing that you talk about, and we've shared before, is that when it comes to winning and then staying winning, the continuing success, the difference between a coach who wins one game and somebody who creates a dynasty of championships, how can you explain the difference when it comes to strategy?
Well, the thing is, you could have a strategy that you put together based on the environment the way it is now, and you can win. You can execute that strategy and out the other end get exactly what you planned for. And that's fantastic. But to stay winning, if you execute that same strategy, at best, you're going to get some outcome that is probably less than what you got the first time. Why? Because the environment changes. Like, I would not be surprised that between when we came into the studio today and the time we leave, something will pop up on my iPhone that says, hey, the world's changed again. This has happened in this foreign country. This person has, done this, or this new thing is, happening around the country, or a new law, right? So it's happening all the time, which it just goes to prove that willing to win, being part of the Legion, staying up to date on the changes that are out there, and developing your own personal strategy is absolutely critical. Not just to some, success where you get more money or a bigger office, but just to being able to live a fulfilling life and help and support others in your community. You need the tools to do that. Strategy can help you get there.
That you explain that so well, because what people forget in our daily lives is how much strategy impacts us and how much it's aligned with the culture. So when I think about dieting, I remember the days when fat-free was the trend, and you go to the grocery store and everything had a fat-free alternative. Now, that's tough to find because we're into this low carb strategy, right? So you can find the keto bread, but you can't find the fat-free yogurt as readily. So it is interesting how much our strategies in life lend themselves then to cultural influence in terms of what we embrace, what we think is good or bad. I mean, one minute, you're saying sugar's horrible and bad for you. And then the next minute, I just saw a report recently where they said, not all sugar is bad. And believe me, I'm hanging my hat on that one.
I know you are.
You know what I'm saying?
It was weird. We were in the restaurant and we were talking to a waiter, and it was, like you had New Age options, there, and gluten-free options. And he was saying how he had been, basically berated by a customer just a few minutes before because they didn't have, a gluten-free pizza, which is what this guy wants. And then when they finally made it special for him, even though they had run out of some ingredients, they figured out a way to do it. They brought it to his table. Then the guy ordered a beer. Which, it's like, okay.
I love it. Like when I've definitely done this in my past, when you say, oh, I want, fat-free milk in that Starbucks drink that's 5,000 calories. That difference of the milk is what will make it feel, will feel like you're not being bad in your diet. So part of what we're doing, obviously, is sharing anecdotal stories that we hope will make you smile. But we also have a deeper purpose here with Willing to Win, and that is for Jeff and all of our team to collectively pull together all of our experience, knowledge, and tried and true research that is part of what we ultimately want to put in our book series, and impart that guidance to you in a practical and tactical way to apply it to your life. So our team, our production meetings entail a lot of research, and thanks to the internet, we can do that quite readily. I don't have to go into the library and go, pull up Nexus Lexis, which was the old school way that journalists had to do their research. We can actually, thanks to Google Scholar, something Jeff had turned me on to, find a lot of case studies and research analysis of many of the things that we're talking about that we hope we can impart to you to improve your life. So I uncovered what I thought was a fascinating concept, and that is that today in our competitive world, yes, to be a leader, one might feel that you rise to the top if you have that competitive spirit, if you are somebody who will maybe in some ways win at all costs, but there's a price we pay for that because young people especially have really changed, and you talked about this with some of the, corporate examples of strategy. There is a social responsibility that we as consumers are now tying to our money, tying to our purchases. So if I know a company has a benevolent approach to their life and their strategy, I'm more inclined to be a consumer toward that company because the brand gives me that warm feeling that I'm not just selfishly buying a good or service, I'm actually doing good by giving that company some of my hard-earned money.
And the flip side too, when you think about it, we talk often, you probably heard the expression, you vote with your dollars, right? Or you vote with your feet, right?
That's right.
And voting with your dollars is the other way too. You wouldn't want to go into an establishment that is investing in things in this world that don't agree with your values, right? And if that's the case, why would you arm them with bullets, right? Arm them with dollars that they can then go and use to create the world that you're fighting against on the other side. It's sort of like ordering a beer after you've asked for the gluten-free pizza. It just doesn't make sense.
That was such a good example. And I remember in college, Doc Martens were popular. So I had a friend who had completely embraced, the animal cruelty mantra, if you will, to where she would not go to a company or wear makeup if there was animal cruelty involved, yet she was wearing leather Doc Martens. So then I had to question, was a cow killed in this process? You have to kind of realize, as we all do, that some of the ethical choices we make are us picking and choosing what we will or will not acknowledge about the reality.
A vegetarian and a vegan, or and like whether or not a vegan will eat food that was prepared that in a skillet that might have had meat in it in the prior meal or something like that. These are all the things we have to figure out. And if for those younger folks in the audience, you're gonna look up as Doc Marten, right?
They've made a comeback. Picture a combat boot. They have. They're out there now. I mean, everyone. Everything comes full circle.
Members only jacket comes back. Then we will be silent. I'm willing to win.
Well, and when we look at this concept of being a responsible leader, there are so many examples, and companies want to brag about these examples, right? Because the upside is, hey, I may lose some initial upfront profit if I'm putting the environment first, for example. But in the long run, as Jeff said, when we vote with our dollars, when we vote with what we believe in, and ultimately then become a lifelong consumer who's tied to that brand and who is loyal to that brand, you inevitably then can have the positive outcome of being even more successful financially. And bonus, people think you are socially responsible. So one case that was cited in this study, the CEO of Maple Leaf Foods, it's a corporation based in Canada, they have actually planned and strategized. They want to reduce the company's environmental footprint by 50% in just the next 3 years, so by 2025. And so what they have essentially admitted is, hey, we're choosing environmental stability over increased profit. So that's a sacrifice, but is it really? Because it's a strategy where in the end, there will be a silver lining.
Yeah, and I think that, part of this is, being aware, like participating in these shows, starting to get that awareness of what's going on around you in terms of what's being told to you and understanding their strategies. And I think there's 3 levels of that. Number one, to do a strategy without regard for its moral or political implications is just a no-no, right? We don't want to do that. So second thing is we should act in a way that's appropriate and supports whatever social aims that organization is associated with. We hope they're good things for a lot of people. The third thing is to claim that and then find ways to make the number, but without really doing much. And I've seen that as well. We've done work with an industrial brand that everybody on this, in the audience, would certainly know. And they were struggling to meet numbers like this. And the ways they were meeting those numbers didn't necessarily produce the kind of results that you would think would be produced by that kind of reduction. But the bottom line is, we're all trying, we're all learning, and it's just up to us to be aware and find out who is giving their best effort, which is sometimes all we can ask, because it's a complicated world, and who's trying to put one over on us. Those are the ones that we've got to watch and keep our guard up for.
That's so true. We all are looking for a sign or a reason, and unfortunately, we're all a tweet away, if you work for a company, of having that stain on your reputation. I mean, so you do have to be careful how you navigate things and hope that it's not received in a negative light. And that's where social media doesn't always do us justice in that respect. Well, this is all great because it's really about the environment and how strategy is just, permeating everything that we do. It's all around us. And Alyssa Nolte, our socialite correspondent, when we come back, is going to help us examine these environmental sensing mechanisms and some of the ways that companies are trying to execute their strategies that don't always make sense. Stay with us.
Willing to win.
Thanks for staying with Willing to Win. I'm Tara Thomas-Gettman.
And I'm Jeff Kaplan.
And Alyssa Nolte is back with us, our socialite correspondent. We are fortunate to have a younger person who helps us uncover a lot of interesting finds when it comes to researching things that apply to the topic. So this episode is really not just about strategy, but specifically how the environment is impacted, or how, strategy not only impacts your environment, but how you may not even recognize the influence that's happening around you. And the way you break it down, Jeff, is there's a difference between external sensing mechanisms when it comes to internal and external. So give us some insight about that.
Yeah, and that's, the external sensing mechanisms are the things that you set up to sort of help you understand the world that's going on around you, right? So that you know that a potential change could be heading your way. It's the same thing with, touch or look or taste, and how those things help you interact with the environment. But environmental sensing mechanisms can be, websites that you go to for certain information. They can be friends that are in this industry or that industry, or live in this place or live in that place. And you need to be able to touch base with that network of resources, your environmental sensing mechanisms, to make sure you have a really good grasp on what's happening and what's about to happen next, so that you're better prepared to deal with it, whatever the case may be.
That's a great way to explain it. And Alyssa, you found that when it comes to products, consumers sometimes don't get it, right? Because we are not tapping into all those environmental cues around us. And that really impacts the success of how products are marketed and whether they're purchased. So explain a little bit about that concept.
Socialite.
Absolutely. Sometimes there's total misalignment between what consumers want and what companies think that they want. So in the late 1990s, Procter & Gamble, a great company known for a lot of really great products, launched a first-of-its-kind odor-eliminating spray called Febreze. And we've all heard of Febreze. It smells great in the studio. So, we have a great Febreze. It smells wonderful in here. No issues with the smells of the studio. But let me tell you that Febreze almost completely failed. They almost pulled it from the shelves. What is now a $1 billion flagship product for Procter & Gamble almost didn't happen. Now, they spent a lot of money developing this flagship product. They were very excited about it. They hired one of the best marketers at the time to come in and do their marketing campaign. They launched it, and they were ready to sit back and clink some champagne glasses, and nobody was buying their product. And absolutely mystified, they did something that many companies will do. They went out into the field to try to figure out what was going on. Why was nobody buying this product? And so they did this thing where they actually went to people's houses to have a conversation, to do some environmental sensing, if you will, to understand, why are people not interested in my product? Why are people not wanting to buy Febreze? The real breakthrough came when they went into the house of a cat lady who had 9 cats. Okay, so do you guys remember the Noseblind campaign?
Yes.
Do you guys remember that campaign?
I don't remember that, but yeah.
So
The giant nose was pictured in the commercials, I think. Yeah.
So what they discovered is that this cat lady, as they were talking to her, they were sitting in her living room, and they were actually having to take turns exiting the house because they were struggling to breathe with the overwhelming cat smell. And by the end of the conversation, the homeowner says to them, "Isn't it great? My cats don't even smell." She had become nose blind. She had gotten so used to the smell of her cats, she didn't even realize that they smelled.
With 9 cats, I think she's nose blind, deaf, and dumb.
Yes, that's a lot of cats.
That's gotta.
And that was the genius behind it, because that, by listening to the consumers,
Right.
that launched an incredibly successful campaign.
Well, so they had to pivot their strategy. Instead of saying, we've created this revolutionary odor eliminator, they completely changed their campaign. They had to start with letting the audience know, your house smells, you need this odor eliminator. So the entire campaign went from, we have this cool new product, to friends coming over and smelling the fish you just cooked, or friends coming over and smelling the dog who's been laying on the couch all day. So the campaign completely changed. They had to pivot their strategy to go from, we've done something revolutionary, to you have a problem, and they had to go ahead and make sure that people understood that they had an issue they had to solve.
That's so interesting.
It's just changing the way people think about the product, because sometimes it's the benefit that you want, and sometimes it's a problem that you want to solve. And in this case, it's a problem you may not know you have.
Right.
It reminds me, we were talking in the break about Jeff Foxworthy's got a new comedy special on Netflix, which is great. Check it out. And he says that during the time of COVID, he had to wear a mask, and during that time, he was breathing in his own breath each day, and he realizes now post-COVID that he has to apologize to every single person that he's ever met or interacted with in his life because of that. But that's a crazy experience, especially at Procter & Gamble. And we have a consulting company, as many of our viewing audience knows, called Lift Innovate, and we very rarely ever mention any of the companies that we've done business with. And I personally have done an extensive amount of business with Procter & Gamble, and they're my favorite company. And I sure hope they don't do something bad, because if I were to hold one company up that I'm like, this company is so cool, because I've worked a lot with these folks. They're really, really smart to the person. They really want to do the right thing, and they're so inventive. We actually did some work on one of their largest plants, and I got a tour of it, and I went up to this one machine that had, they were filling shampoo bottles, and it was both shampoo and conditioner, but not mixed together. They were like two different colors, and they would like swirl them. And when the bottle was done, it would look like, that it was a swirl on the outside, and it looked like it was the label. It was done so nicely. And the guy that invented the swirl was there with me. He's like, dude, you have no idea how hard this was. Well, you know what? It was rejected by the market because they thought it was the label. They didn't understand that was actually the product. So he had to go back and figure out how to make it so that it would have random errors in the swirl, so people would believe that they're looking at the product.
It was too perfect.
Can you imagine like a great artist going back to, like a Picasso going back to a painting and saying, let me just, mess this up a little bit so people will
That's
believe
the Sistine Chapel. Can you just take that wing off over there?
Yeah, just make that a little less perfect.
Well, and it goes back to kind of the overall mission of Willing to Win, in that we have to not just identify how things are, evolving and new ways of thinking, but new ways of working too. And when we think about that in a very tangible way, think of how automation has replaced a lot of the traditional ways that people did their jobs. So, the assembly line, where people were lined up doing individual steps, has sometimes given way to a robot or a computer-operated approach. And you had a great example from a really popular movie that was remade with Johnny Depp.
Yeah, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. In the very beginning of the movie, his dad's job is to screw the cap on top of the toothpaste. And his job, he's on the assembly line, very much like Lucy and I Love Lucy, dealing with the chocolates, although it's not quite the speed of the conveyor belt. He's screwing on the caps on the toothpaste. And one of the premise of the movie is that because of the chocolate factory opening back up, candy sales are skyrocketing. And because everyone wants the golden ticket, everyone's eating more candy. And so toothpaste sales are going up. The company's doing really well. And they can afford to invest in some automation that will allow them to basically take Mr. Bucket's job and have a robot do it instead. So he loses his job. They hand him his pink.
That's why he goes and sleeps in that bed with all the other people?
No, those are the grandparents.
Oh, those are the grandparents. This is the dad. I'm sorry.
This is dad. But the great thing is they never lose that optimism. There's a very striking scene there in the middle where he's lamenting about what he's going to do. His son has just asked him, why aren't you at work, Dad? And he goes, oh, the company's just giving me some time off. And Charlie says, oh, like a summer vacation. Yeah, like a summer vacation. Cut to a scene where Mom and Dad are talking about what they're going to do. And, Mom says, don't worry, Mr. Bucket, we'll figure it out. And it's like a touching scene. All throughout the movie, we see this family sticking together and doing whatever it takes to succeed as a family. Doing the right thing as a family to succeed. And then by the end, Charlie, ends up rejecting the chocolate factory because it would mean leaving his family, something he values, something he truly cares about. And then in the end, they are able to keep their family together to move into the chocolate factory. And one of the very final scenes, we find out that Mr. Bucket has a new job. He's repairing the robot that breaks down all the time that took his old job.
So, that's great.
There's two things in there I just want to comment on. The first one is the idea that, we know right now, we're your environmental sensing mechanism. And if you hear nothing else, know that a lot of the jobs that people have today are about to be, displaced. You're about to be displaced. But that's the kind of strategy. If you start working now to develop those new skills and say, how is my job going to be replaced? The chances are that the job that follows that will be higher paying and have better career opportunities. And the actual number of jobs that are created on the backside will be greater than those jobs that are left.
That's right.
That's number one. The other thing I just wanted to mention too is we talk a lot about leadership and the responsibility of the leader. Sometimes leadership is collaborative, right? Like an organization, or product leadership, right? And we must remember, whether it's an individual or an organization, that leaders are not responsible for what they say. I'm gonna let that sink in. Leaders are not responsible for what they say. They are responsible for what their followers hear, right? What their followers understand. So even though we got this product, Febreze, and it's in the studio here, it's all through, the whole building, right? We bought into that, right? But we wouldn't have had that if they hadn't switched it around and realized they're not hearing the right thing. They're not understanding the value that we're providing them. We need to change that. So that was an act of leadership from a good company. I mentioned I really like Procter & Gamble.
Yes.
Well, thank you for sharing those great examples, both of you. I enjoyed hearing that, and I definitely remember the impact of that Noseblind campaign. Some of those commercials just stick with you. And I think it made us all paranoid, and we started asking, and I've done this when a person on the outside, a friend, somebody who doesn't live there regularly comes in, that's the first thing you want to say is like, does my house smell, right? Because we realized through a company's marketing that we were possibly nose blind.
Whether I think it does or not, the first thing I do if I hear someone's coming over is grab my Febreze and run through the house really quick. So, they've gotten me, and I was a small kid when that campaign came out, and I still remember it and worry about it.
She was a small kid.
I was a small kid when that campaign. I'm going to rub it in just a little bit. I was a small kid when that campaign came out.
Well, we're glad you are sticking with Willing to Win as we talk about strategy in this episode, specifically the environment and how it's impacting strategy times 10 in so many levels. So we want you to tell us a takeaway. What's a question that we can reflect on moving forward?
We want to ask, can you think of anything in the world that suggests a need to change your strategy or direction? And really what we're trying to do is to get you to start to come closer with this content and start thinking about how it apply in your life. So think about all the stuff that's going on in the world. Is there something out there you see that could end up impacting your world? And what would be that strategy to try to make sure that when that change comes, it not only doesn't cause you any problem, but you can actually leverage it to get something that you want. It'd be great to hear your stories.
That's great. To hear this episode and more, go to our YouTube channel, Willing to Win, or our website. That's willing2win.org. You can also follow us on social media, #WillingToWinLegion, and we do that as W2W Legion. At Dr. Jeff Kaplan is the tag, and we're out there and excited to engage with you. A recap, our first strategy episode really questioned the basic, what is it? What is strategy? And you can delve into that episode again through YouTube. Second episode, we looked at what does strategy do? And today, examining strategy and the environment, what's to come in the last two episodes of this season.
Well, we're going to look at strategy and its relationship with information. Number one, what information and how do you get information that you need to make sure you make good, solid strategies and you're not out there trying to sell something in an environment that could insult a local culture or, like all the examples that we talked about. So that's that, to gather information. The other is strategy as a communication device. How do we use strategy to communicate our aims and get the help and support of the followers that we need along the way? Very rarely does a big change happen where people only realize it, at the last minute. Far more likely that great success is due to people being aware of a struggle or a movement all along the way. And then finally, we're going to end this fifth season with a look at strategy and experience. How are we experiencing changes that are coming into our environment, changes to our strategy, changes to the world around us, and most importantly, what we can do about it.
Excellent. Thanks for sticking with Willing to Win as we continue to dive into strategy in this season 5. Our previous seasons are available on YouTube. We'd love you to follow us and check it out. Thanks for joining us.
These episodes are the first reports filed from the front lines of change. where a growing legion of individuals and organizations are discovering what it takes to win and stay winning in a world defined by change and driven by interconnected human networks.
Willing to Win is produced by Lift Productions. Guests on the program are not compensated, nor is their appearance representative of the Willing to Win views. Willing to Win does not necessarily endorse any people, products, or services.